So this is the phoniest speech you're ever going to see from an Australian politician. Jing Lee in the parliament, lying, crying, sighing, a hugely confected performance to justify her complete reversal from saying that last year when she voted for Ben Hood's bill to save babies, that she's pro-life from conception, to this year where she suddenly supports a bill that allows healthy babies to be injected with poison right up until birth. This is the grossest speech you're ever going to see. We're going to unpack it. That's today on the Dr. Joe Show. Before we start today, could I please ask that you subscribe to the channel if you're new here? So quick recap on Jing Lee. Last year, she gave a speech in the parliament identifying that she was going to vote for Ben Hood's bill. But she'd made an earlier deal to pair with Michelle Lenzik, who's a pro-abortion member of her own party. What that would mean, because Michelle said she couldn't come into the chamber because she was recovering from cancer, what that meant was that Jing Lee's vote would cancel out Michelle's and it wouldn't count towards the bill. Now, when I learnt just before the dinner break last year that Jing Lee was planning to do this, I knew that I had to get in touch with her because we were going to lose by one vote if she did that. And so I saw Jing Lee just as she was about to enter the dining room. I saw her there in the public space and I just said, Jing Lee, can I have a chat? Now, we had a chat. It went for about 15 minutes. It was in a public place. It was all very cordial and she didn't understand how close the vote was. So I went through how everybody was voting and I explained to her that if she paired, she would be the reason the bill didn't pass and that I would have to expose that to people on socials. Had about 120,000 followers then. And I said, I'll expose it and I'll let people know that you were the reason it didn't pass. She decided of her own volition in that conversation to make the decision, once she realised how close it was, that she wouldn't pair with Michelle Lenzik. It was a very cordial conversation. She asked questions, I answered them. I didn't think anything of it. We actually took a selfie together, we went straight after the chat just to mark the fact that we talked. It was lovely. You can see it there. And then a couple of hours later during the debate, she texts me and actually thanks me for talking to her in the dinner break, for taking the initiative. But the thing is this, that led to all hell breaking loose because when she didn't pair, the other side had to scramble to find their extra vote and they very nearly lost. And then what happened was in the ensuing days, the pro-abortion side obviously got to Jing Lee and she made an extraordinary statement in the parliament 2 weeks later where she said she'd been bullied by a mysterious visitor. Now, she doesn't name me, but the pro-abortion press uses it as a hit job on me. I then go on David Bevan's radio station and I show the selfie, I show the text message, and she looks stupid. Like, it looks stupid because they clearly, like, if someone's bullying you, you don't send them a text message hours later to say thanks for talking to you. We'd literally only talked for 15 minutes in a public place. There was no threat that I'd made other than to hold her accountable for what she did in the parliament, which is the very function of democracy. But that's Jing Lee, So my takeaway at the time was I didn't criticise her publicly for making that statement in the parliament. I was grateful that she voted the right way. But I could see she'd thrown me under the bus for the sake of her own career, her own reputation, because I think at that point she was not going to get pre-selected from the Conservatives in the Liberal Party. So our only hope was the left. So that's why she made the statement that she made. But then it became very clear to Jing Lee that she was not even going to get pre-selected then. So she resigned from the Liberal Party and started her own party. So she's now up for re-election again. And the really good news is because she doesn't have the Liberal Party apparatus, I very much doubt we're going to see Jing Lee again. I think this will be the last pro-abortion speech we see from Jing Lee. All of her confected drama that we're going to watch in a minute, we're never going to see that again because I just can't see her getting the thousands of votes you need as an independent. There aren't that many people out there who like and respect and appreciate what Jing Lee's done in the parliament, irrespective of the abortion issue where she's lost all credibility. But she's just not going to be in the parliament again. But let's take a look at what she says in this speech.
Removing the threshold of significant risk of injury and only allowing terminations when it's necessary to save the life will not necessarily reduce the number of terminations performed in South Australia. Instead, this change threatens to disempower doctors and medical teams.
So you can see straight away this is a speech that's been written for her, probably by the South Australian Abortion Action Coalition, who's clearly been in Jing Lee's ear. So throughout the speech, you're going to hear things like late-term abortion is rare, this should be between a woman and a doctor, this is abortion care as reproductive rights. She totally adopts the language of the pro-abortion leftist establishment in this speech, and it's a complete 360 on the speech she gives last year. In this bit of the speech where she's just reading, it's She's very clear these are not her words. These are things that she's been told to say. You have to say it if you're going to be part of that establishment. She gives such a lame justification of why she's against the bill. She says that removing the threat of significant risk of injury to the woman will lead to harming women. It'll disempower doctors and women's medical teams. But, all of this just obscures the actual fact, which nobody from their side mentions, which is that if a woman's life is seriously at risk, so whether she's in an emergency situation or if doctors have a credible assessment that she is at a significant risk of injury, the response will be emergency cesarean to deliver that baby. They don't waste the time to do the late-term abortion, which is a feticide. It's an injection into the baby's heart of poison. The baby then has to die in utero. The mother then goes through labor. This takes between 24 to 48 hours. Like, it's an extraordinarily long period of time, 72 hours sometimes if the labor goes for that long. You're not doing that if the woman's life is at risk or if she's at a significant risk of injury. You're going to do an emergency cesarean. And I've talked about Leah Darrow on this show, who at 22 weeks, the doctor said, you're not going to be able to continue to carry this pregnancy. But Leah didn't want her baby to be killed. They did an emergency cesarean, got the baby out in less than an hour. Sylvester, who was born at 22 weeks, is now a thriving little baby boy. But that is the thing. That's the reality of the treatment. A late-term abortion is not a actual treatment to a woman who has a physical health problem late in pregnancy. You don't do feticide for the woman's health, for her physical health. And so, this is just nonsense from Jing Lee. This is just nonsense. That's how we know the speech has been written by someone else, because it's just the lie that's parroted by the pro-abortion side.
I note that a large part of the commentary around this amendment bill has focused on the argument that mental health should not be an acceptable reason for late-term abortions. President-elect of Ranscourt, Dr. Nisha Knott, has stated that one of the many troubling aspects of how this bill has been presented is that the mental health of the pregnant person will no longer be considered relevant rationale for a decision to terminate. This is enormously problematic. Problem health is health, and is no less important to the overall well-being and ability to safely carry a pregnancy to term than is physical health. Indeed, this was a concern echoed by many of those who have contacted my office, with one constituent stating, "I'm also appalled by what seems to be a denial of mental health care is part of a healthcare which runs completely counter to 21st century undertakings of patient-centered care." This broader dismissal of mental health as a legitimate factor in reproductive healthcare decisions is deeply troubling.
So you can see there, because they can't make the argument that you have to have a late-term abortion to save the physical life of a woman, because they can't make that argument because of what we just discussed. The woman will have an emergency cesarean like Leah Darrow if her life is really at risk, if her physical health is threatened. The argument that they fall back on is mental health. And Jing Lee says, there's been a lot of commentary on mental health, and she quotes the head of Ranscog, who says that mental health is health. And the real gaping hole in all of this is that the feticide, the injection of poison into the baby's heart, how does that correct the woman's mental health? If she's struggling late in her pregnancy with depression or psychosis or anxiety, how does feticide help that? Feticide kills the baby, but it's not a treatment for mental health. And in fact, Taylor Jane Jackson, who had a late-term abortion at 27 weeks in South Australia, killed a healthy baby. She told the doctors, "I'm going to kill myself unless you kill my baby. I won't be here unless you kill my baby." That's just blackmail. It's emotional blackmail. And how does feticide help Taylor Jane Jackson? She didn't see a psychiatrist. There's not a requirement under the law. Like, if this is really about mental health, where are the safeguards? There's no actual requirement that you see a psychiatrist. And in fact, if you're a mother of a newborn baby and you present with mental health issues, you can't say to the doctor, "Kill my baby," because that's just not a treatment for the mental health condition. The mental health condition is caused by mental health problems. It's not caused by the presence of the baby. And so, this is just a circular argument that they're saying mental health care is healthcare, mental health problem is a health problem. No one's denying that. But what we are saying is that you shouldn't be able to kill a human being on the basis of your mental health. It just shouldn't be allowed. And in fact, Pro-Life Health Professionals Australia, in the letter that they write to the MPs, they ask the question, which clinical guideline advocates for elective abortion as the treatment of choice for mothers who are acutely suicidal, arguably the most serious form of a mental health illness? The answer is simple: there are none. So there is zero guideline, mental health guideline, that establishes a late-term abortion as the cure to an acute mental health problem. It is just not a known treatment, and yet that is the basis for which they justify the bill. And what PHPA says in response to RANZCOG is this: they say Dr. Cott's subsequent comment is also difficult to comprehend, stating that a mother's mental health is no less important than the overall well-being and ability to safely carry a pregnancy to term, does not warrant that the infant be electively terminated. Safely carry is terminology traditionally used to mean safety for both the infant and the mother. If this is the intention, the infant should be delivered alive and admitted to the nursery, as most neonatal intensive care nurseries provide care after 23 weeks. This is appropriate healthcare. And so, it is very clear if a woman is really struggling to the point of suicide with her mental health condition, then early delivery should be the answer. It shouldn't be injecting the baby's heart with poison and delivering them dead. That is not a cure to a mental health problem. So, it's very hard when you see these well-trodden lies that are being made by the pro-abortion side, then repeated in the parliament. But I do think that over time, we're going to see more and more of the truth coming out as people speak up, as these PHPA health workers are doing.
These cases usually involve circumstances of severe fetal abnormalities, compatible with life, or unexpected medical developments that are serious threats to the pregnant woman's health or life. It is very concerning that proponents of this amendment bill use extremely emotive and misleading arguments, claiming that 79 healthy, viable babies have been killed in South Australia since the Termination of Pregnancy Act came into effect in 2022. While this number is indeed taken from the reports of the South Australian Abortion Reporting Committee, methods and terminology, these reports clearly state that the reported figures include induction of labour without expectations of fetal survival. It is misleading and deceptive to claim that each of these instances involve healthy babies.
So this is the bit where I know that her speech has been written by pro-abortion trolls, by the South Australian Abortion Action Coalition. It's not written by her because she's just parroting the lie, the biggest lie that's being told by the pro-abortion side during this campaign. So she starts off by talking about fetal anomaly. Now, the bill actually carves out fetal anomalies. Sarah wanted to save all the babies, but I guess we knew that these people are monstrously evil. Like the minute they see disability, they think, oh, well, that baby should be killed. And so we carved that out. And the bill was specifically about babies without fetal anomalies. I don't know why she starts talking about that at the beginning, but then she goes on to say, it's a lie that the 79 babies that Sarah has been talking about are healthy babies. She says, I know these babies, these 79, they're coming from the South Australian Abortion Reporting Series. So she acknowledges that that's where it's coming from, which is what the trolls do online. They acknowledge that that's where it's coming from. But then they obfuscate with this one quote in the report. I'm going to read to you the bit, and she reads it in her speech. There's this bit in the report that the South Australian Abortion Reporting Committee writes, and it says this: termination of pregnancy includes induction of labour without expectation of fetal survival. For example, in the case of severe preeclampsia at pre-viable gestations or prolonged rupture of membranes with severe infection. So Jing Lee is saying these 79 babies that we say are healthy, because in the table it clearly makes them, they're not in the category for fetal anomaly. They're not in the category for a termination to save the life of the mother. They're in the category of a non-life-threatening significant risk to the mother's mental or physical health. So that's why we say they're healthy, because they're not in the other two categories. So they're healthy babies. But she says they're not viable, and she quotes that part of the report. But the report really clearly says that termination of pregnancy includes induction of labour without expectation of fetal survival at pre-viable gestations. So pre-viable, what does that mean? Well, viability is considered to be the point at which a baby can survive outside the womb. And SA Health's own guidelines says very clearly, they've got a guideline called the perinatal care at the threshold of viability, and they say infants who are born prematurely at 21 weeks gestation or earlier are not considered viable. So they make it very clear, 21 weeks. Now, the legislation itself gives a clue as to when viability is. It says that after 22 weeks and 6 days, you need 2 doctors to approve the abortion, but before that, you can have an abortion on demand with 1 doctor. So that 22 weeks and 6 days marker is a legislative indication that something else is happening at 22 weeks and 6 days, that there's something different. And what is in fact different is that is viability, that likely a Darrow's baby, if you've got a child after 22 weeks, they've got an increasing chance of survival if delivered alive. If you don't kill them via feticide, but you allow them to be delivered alive and prematurely, at that stage, they've got increasing odds. By 28 weeks, it's 96% chance of survival. So for Jing Lee to say that these 79 healthy babies are not viable, well, it's just a blatant lie, because if you look at the table, it clearly says these are for abortions 22 weeks and 6 days after. So these are for late-term abortions once you need 2 doctors to approve. So she's just repeating the lie of pro-abortion trolls. That's how we know so clearly that this has been written for her. The same reporting series that these numbers come from, it's very clear that these are reasons for termination, and it defines termination as the intentional expulsion, with the intention being the death of the embryo or fetus. So these are not spontaneous losses, these 79. This is not a Leah Darrow situation where you've suddenly had to deliver that baby alive in an emergency. No, this is a situation where 2 doctors have had to approve in order for you to be compliant with the legislation, and there's been an intentional death. And so, it is just... It's frustrating to see lies from TikTok trolls repeated in the parliament, but I guess it's also in some ways a vindication, because it really exposes Jing Lee for who she is now. It really exposes her. She's literally repeating the worst of the pro-abortion lies online in the parliament.
I still firmly believe that life is precious and it begins at conception. However, I also believe that we must value the lives and well-being of the women facing these very complex, emotional, and deeply personal decisions.
So you can see here she's starting to get emotional. And I think it's because it's her conscience starting to tweak. We're going to see a bit more of that in the next clip. But you can just see this, it just doesn't add up. So she says, I believe that life begins at conception, and all life is precious. But I also support the women who are facing these really difficult decisions. I think at the end of the day, if you really believe that all human life is precious, this bill is about healthy babies after 23 weeks and up until birth. These babies could be delivered alive. You don't have to inject their hearts with poison and burn their hearts, causing an excruciating pain and a cardiac arrest, and then delivering them deliberately stillborn. You don't have to go through any of that. This is not necessary to save a woman's life ever. A late-term abortion is never medically necessary. So this, verbal gymnastics that she's trying to go through, I believe life is precious, but I support abortion up to birth. It just doesn't make sense. And you would begin to see Jing Lee unravel from this point on.
As a Buddhist, I have been brought up to believe that life starts at conception and that life should not be destroyed. However, modern interpretations allow for more flexibilities, especially when abortion is necessary. Apologies, Mr. President.
It's actually really sad. It's really sad to watch this, because she's just unraveling before our eyes. She's given a speech that's been given to her by the pro-abortion lobby. She's desperate to remain in parliament. She wants that with every fibre in her being. She knows that if she gives this speech, she can get a puff piece in the left-wing media, which she does the next day. In Daily has a big headline about Jing Lee's emotional speech and her change of heart, and it's just a puff piece. And she's desperate to get the thousands of votes that she needs to stay in Parliament. I can't see how she gets them. I haven't met a single person who even knew her before all of this abortion drama. No one even knew Jing Lee. She hasn't got a constituency voting for her. And then she just throws her Buddhist faith under the bus. Like she just, she acknowledges that Buddhism says that all life is precious, that all human life has value. And you can see her unraveling as she's crying here because her conscience is tweaking. It's ringing out. But ultimately, she's a woman who's willing to put everything away other than the thing that is her career. She threw me under the bus. Well, first of all, she threw Michelle Lenzik under the bus when she reneged on the pair arrangement because I spoke to her. Now, I would have believed that was a good faith conversation where she genuinely realized how close the vote was, and so that's why she reneged on the pair. That's what I would have thought, and I think that's the right decision because you don't put the lives of babies below a parliamentary convention to pair. You put the lives of babies first. So she did the right thing there. But then, after Michelle Lenzik and the left-wing pylon, she throws me under the bus with that extraordinary speech 2 weeks later in the Parliament saying that somebody had bullied her. She doesn't name me, but we know it's me based on the things that she says. And then this year, she throws the babies under the bus, even though she has said categorically that she is pro-life from conception. She throws the babies under the bus because she wants that puff piece in the media. She wants the left on her side. She mistakenly believes that's how she's going to get reelected. It's not. She's not going to get reelected. I cannot see a way how that could happen. But it is just really sad to watch. I mean, the thing about politics that I've seen from the outside is people get really corrupted in that place. Like these decisions have eternal consequences. These are weighty matters between right and wrong, between good and evil. And Jing Lee in this speech, she sided with wrong, she sided with the evil, and you can see the toll that it takes on her. In Daily spins it as like an emotional change of heart. But what I think, and tell me whether you agree in the comments, I think it's the internal turmoil of someone who has completely sold out their soul. And if you want to see how clearly she's fallen, then take a look at the speech. Just take a look at this little extract from what she said last year.
I believe I'm the first politician with Buddhist faith that has been elected in South Australian Parliament. The abortion debate has been a sensitive and emotional topic for many of those in my community that calls on us to consider the moral, legal, medical and religious aspect of the issue. I would like to present my views to support this bill, and I believe I represent a number of individuals and communities that feel the same way about this important matter as I do. They would not be seen at rallies. They would not be seen making comments on social medias. They're the quiet ones. But the quiet ones is speaking through me tonight to support this particular bill. As a Buddhist, I have been brought up in a community where we believe that life should not be destroyed. We regard those who are causing death as morally wrong if the death is caused deliberately and by negligence. Buddhists regard life as starting as conception.
So you can see it really clearly. That's the speech she gave last year. Like, what has happened to this woman in the last 12 months? Just 1 year ago, she gives an incredible pro-life speech where she says, I'm speaking for the people that they're not noisy, but they, like me, want to protect these babies. She says, as a Buddhist, I've been raised to know that life begins at conception, that to take an innocent life is morally wrong. She says it in black and white, and she actually goes on in that speech to talk about her own father who was adopted. She said that, my father was the 11th child in that family. He could have been aborted, but he was adopted, and I'm here today as a result of that. She talks about her own family's legacy where because of adoption as opposed to abortion, she's allowed to exist. It's just extraordinary to think of this journey that she's been on to go from pro-life from conception to pro-abortion right up until birth. So on the one hand, you might look at Jing Lee, the speech that she gives now, and say, well, at least she acknowledges there's a life. But that's not how I see it. Because on the other hand, you have a woman who acknowledges there's a life, but is totally okay with killing that life if it advances her career. Like she knows there's an innocent human being there. Her Buddhist faith tells her that. Her own father's life story tells her that. And yet she's willing to throw her own father under the bus, all of these babies under the bus, her own very religion under the bus because of this mistaken belief that it's going to further her career. And I think that's a lie that's been fed to her by Michelle Lenzik and by Tammy Franks and by the South Australian Abortion Action Coalition. I think that's a lie that they've told her, that you say this speech, you vote against Sarah's bill, we'll get a puff piece for you in the media, we'll support you, you'll get elected. But anyone on the left, they're voting for the Greens, they're voting for Labor, they're not voting for Jing Lee. And so I just don't see how she maintains a position in the parliament after this. So all of this to say, it just shows you how important it is that we vote for authentically pro-life politicians. Like that when we vote at the ballot box, that we actually vote for people who have skin in the game, who have borne the cost, people that have put their pro-life colours on their sleeve and have actually had a cost for doing that. You know, that those are the kinds of people we vote for. You can't just vote for someone who tells you they're a Christian or tells you they're a Buddhist and therefore they're on your side. If they haven't actually, you know, shown their pro-life colours, if they haven't actually been willing to be courageous for the babies, I don't think they deserve our vote. So all of this to say, this was a complete shit show from Jing Lee. Like there's no other word to describe it. It's a phony speech, but it's also an embarrassingly pathetic speech because it's just such a 360 without any actual justification for that turnaround. And in the end, she just breaks down because it does all come crashing down for her. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time on The Dr. Jo Show.